I still remember the moment I stepped off the orbital descent pod and onto the surface of Kronos 9. The air was thick with particles of shimmering dust, suspended as if time itself had forgotten to let them fall. The sky overhead was a canvas of pale gold, streaked with backward-moving clouds. Yes, clouds that retreated into themselves, as if inhaling the past. Nothing on this planet moved in the way it should. Streams flowed uphill. Birds, if you could call them that, flew backward, wings flapping in strange rhythms. And my wristwatch? It ticked in reverse. I came here as part of the Temporal Field Observation Program, a mission so controversial the Intergalactic Council nearly shut it down. But Kronos 9 was a mystery too big to ignore. Somehow, this planet had become unstuck from the linear flow of time. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic sense, literally. Local time flowed backward at a measurable rate of 7.2 seconds per minute. We were warned that extended exposure could cause neurological disorientation, memory loopbacks, even emotional regression. I didn't care. I wasn't just here to observe. I had my own reasons. Her name was Elena, my wife. Gone for 17 years now. Kronos 9 gave me something no other place in the universe could. The tiniest sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could see her again. Not a simulation, not a memory hologram, but her, alive and breathing in a world where time moves the other way. Standing on that strange soil, my boots sinking into the past, I realized I wasn't just stepping onto another planet. I was stepping into a question no one had dared to answer. If time could run backward, what would you be willing to undo? The orientation center looked like something from a retrofuturistic movie. Chrome walls reflecting faded light, glass panels inscribed with equations that made my head spin. There were no clocks, just a central orb pulsating with a low hum, tracking the planet's inverted chronology. Everything about the place felt wrong in a way I couldn't quite name. The air was heavy with a quiet tension, like everyone inside knew they weren't just studying time. They were in it, part of its unraveling. Dr. Hallberg, the mission coordinator, was a tall woman with salt-gray hair tied tightly behind her head and eyes that seemed to see through time itself. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You'll experience disorientation," she said, projecting her voice to the 12 of us in the room. "Some of you may relive memories in reverse. Others may find yourselves regressing emotionally. We've even seen cases of language reversal. Don't panic if you start dreaming in Latin." Nervous laughter didn't come. Instead, a man next to me, a geophysicist from Mars Colony 3, raised his hand. "Why are we really here, Doctor? The official file says data collection. But no one sends ex-military and grief therapists for data." Dr. Hallberg didn't blink. Because Kronos 9 doesn't just reverse time. It reanimates what's been lost. Temporarily. And we don't fully understand the rules. My stomach dropped. Reanimate? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I hadn't told anyone why I'd volunteered. My application had been processed like any other. But now, hearing those words, I realized I wasn't alone in what I hoped to find. The briefing ended, but none of us left the room right away. It was as if we were all waiting, hoping for something impossible to happen, something to return. We boarded the crawler, a thick-skinned beast of a vehicle with magnetic treads built for Kronos 9's terrain. No windows, just internal screens that projected what was behind us, not ahead. It made sense, in a cruel kind of way. On this planet, looking forward was meaningless. As the crawler began its descent, I felt the tug, subtle at first, like jet lag, but deeper, molecular. The world outside didn't just shift. It uncoiled. Mountains seemed to undraw themselves. Rivers crept back toward their glaciers. The dust in the air fell upward. Inside, the others sat in silence, gripped by what we were all sensing. Our minds weren't designed for this. I checked my pulse. Normal. But my memories felt out of sync. I kept thinking about Elena, my wife. Then suddenly I was unthinking her. Her face would appear, then blur, then fade, then reappear as if I were remembering her in rewind. Her last smile, her final breath, her quiet surrender. It all came in fragments, then reversed. I closed my eyes, but that made it worse. Dr. Hallberg's voice crackled through the calm. "Remain grounded. Thoughts will slide. Focus on physical sensations." So I focused on the seat, the hum of the crawler, my boots on the floor, anything that proved I was still here. Outside, The sky darkened, not from nightfall, but from sunrise receding backward into black. Trees pulled their leaves inward. Lightning forked from ground to sky. A storm was being unborn. We arrived at Base Station Delta just before sunset. That is, the moment the sun rose backward over the horizon. And I swear, as I stepped off the crawler, I felt it in my bones. This place could undo more than time. It could undo pain, undo choices, undo loss. And if it could, what wouldn't I trade to have one more day with her? Base Station Delta wasn't what I expected. No high-tech spires, no glowing labs, just a cluster of domes nestled in a crater, half-buried like secrets too old to tell. Everything here was functional, minimal. The kind of place built by people who knew that time, quite literally, wasn't on their side. Inside, the air was filtered but heavy with silence. Screens flickered with reversed weather patterns. Hurricanes retreating into calm seas. Volcanoes swallowing back their eruptions. It was eerie, beautiful, terrifying. Dr. Hallberg met me in the central chamber, where a giant temporal map shimmered in fractal motion. "Welcome to the edge of causality," she said with a tired smile. "You'll sleep during daylight hours. We observe at night, when time moves most aggressively." Most aggressively. The words sat in my gut like a stone. My assignment, simple on paper. Document the effects of time reversal on human cognition. Observe, record, reflect. But I knew it would never be that simple. I hadn't come just as a scientist. I came as a man chasing ghosts. "You understand the risks?" she asked. "Memory erosion, emotional dissociation, temporal dislocation?" "I understand," I said. "And I still want in." She studied me. Maybe she saw the grief in my posture, the ache beneath the logic. Or maybe she had that ache too. No one volunteered for Kronos. 9 without reason. Later, in my sleeping pod, I unpacked my journal and the one photo I allowed myself to bring. Elena, smiling, wind in her hair, before the cancer, before the silence. I placed it on the wall, not as a reminder, but as a question. What would I do if time gave her back to me? The first sign came not from the machines, but from the birds. At 0300 hours, I stepped out of the main dome for my first solo observation shift. The night was darker than I'd imagined, a dense, velvety blackness that swallowed sound and depth. Kronos 9 had no moons, only the faint reflected glow of distant stars. I'd expected silence, stillness. Instead, I heard it, birdsong. But it wasn't right. The pitch was inverted, like a melody sung backward. The birds themselves, small, translucent creatures adapted to the planet's time fluctuations, flew in reverse arcs, wingbeats flapping in the wrong direction, returning to nests they had already left. One perched on a tree branch that hadn't been there moments before. I stood frozen, eyes wide, breath caught in the web of unreality. Back in the lab, Dr. Hallberg nodded without surprise. Time reversal affects lower-order life first. Birds, insects, atmospheric patterns. Humans are more resistant, more stubborn, I muttered. She smirked. Same thing. The real shock came hours later, when I reviewed the logs and realized something was missing, my own voice. My audio journals, recorded earlier that day, had slowly begun to degrade. Phrases reversed, thoughts unspoken. In one file, I heard myself ask a question I had never spoken aloud. What if she was never gone? It rattled me. I checked the feed from my room. The photo of Elena had moved, just slightly, her smile wider, her eyes open. I knew I could be imagining it. I hoped I was imagining it. But deep down, I remembered what Hallberg said, memory erosion. I wasn't just here to observe time breaking. I was starting to break with it. I used to think that time was something you could only observe, on clocks, in calendars, in the rising and setting of suns. But on Kronos 9, I began to feel it under my skin. It started subtly. My fingernails shortened overnight, not as if I had clipped them, but as if the very act of growing had reversed itself. A small scar on my left hand, one I'd carried since age 12 after a bicycle accident, faded until only smooth skin remained. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes, touching it over and over, as if repetition might bring the memory back into form. It didn't. I brought it up during our team debrief. Hallberg barely looked up from her screen. "It's expected," she said, typing furiously. "Kronos doesn't reverse time in a linear way. It targets memory, biology, even grief. That last word stuck with me. Grief. Was that what I was losing? Later that night, I found myself back at the garden dome. I wasn't sure why. The walkways were littered with leaves, but they didn't crunch beneath my boots. Instead, they uncrunched, curling back into shape as if time itself had rewound their decay. Then came the moment that haunts me still. My reflection in the glass wall moved before I did. Just a second. Less than that, really. A twitch of my jaw, a tilt of the head. It predicted me. Or maybe I was lagging behind. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of Elena. Not the final days, thin, tired, her hair falling. No, she was young again, vibrant, laughing beneath cherry blossoms in a park I barely remembered. Except I had remembered it. But now, I wasn't so sure which came first, the memory or the dream. Kronos, 9 was unmaking the boundaries. Of past and present. Of body and soul. Of what I could lose and what I might regain. I found it sealed in a steel canister embedded halfway beneath the moss-like growth near the edge of Sector 7. A thick yellow tag dangled from it. Aged, crinkled, somehow untouched by the climate on Kronos 9. My fingers trembled as I turned it over. On the side, scratched in crude etching, were the words. If you're reading this, time is unraveling. It wasn't the warning that stopped my breath. It was the signature. E. Monroe. Elena. The handwriting was hers, delicate, curved, unmistakably human. For a moment, I forgot everything. The research, the reversals, the mission. I sat there in the alien silence of Kronos 9, holding a message from my wife, a woman who had died 20 years ago on Earth. How? Was it planted by someone imitating her? A cruel fabrication? Or had she somehow been here? I cracked the canister open. Inside was a thin notebook and a microdrive. The pages were filled with sketches of landscapes that matched Kronos 9 perfectly. Plants we hadn't discovered yet. Structures we hadn't entered. The microdrive contained personal entries, recorded in her voice. Her voice. She spoke softly. Thane, if you ever make it here, I want you to know, I tried to come back. Time doesn't behave here. I don't know what year it is anymore. But I remember your face. I remember our garden. I remember the smell of jasmine on your coat. I fell to my knees. The impossible had become tangible. Time wasn't just reversing on Kronos 9. It was folding. Somehow, Elena had crossed into this place. Left breadcrumbs through a timeline fractured beyond repair. I didn't know yet if I was chasing her memory, or if, by some miracle, I might still find her. But one thing was certain. The past was no longer behind me. It was reaching out, calling me by name. I followed the coordinates from the microdrive, 7 digits she'd whispered in her last log. They led me to what looked like the remains of a research outpost, half sunken into a crater. Its steel beams had been warped unnaturally, as if time itself had bent them like softened wire. Inside, there was no dust, no decay. Everything was preserved, as though the clock had stopped ticking the moment someone left. Then I heard it. A melody. Soft. Distant. A hum that rose and fell like a lullaby. It was the tune Elena used to hum when she watered the garden. A song she made up, wordless, whimsical. I hadn't heard it in 2 decades. Yet here it was, echoing from the depths of a building in a world light years away. I turned corners, stepped over fallen conduits, followed the sound like a man possessed. It seemed to be moving with me, or ahead of me, always just out of reach. And then I entered the central chamber. A holographic projector flickered to life. A figure appeared, faint, translucent, but unmistakable. Elena, not as she looked when she died, but younger, radiant, dressed in a jacket I once gave her before one of our winter hikes. Her eyes scanned the room as if she could see me, though I knew it was just a recording. I don't know who'll find this, she said. But if it's you, Thane, I hope time has been kinder to you than it has to me. She paused, voice catching. Kronos 9 doesn't just run backwards. It loops. It fractures. I've lived the same day here 100 times. Sometimes I remember you. Sometimes I forget. A tear slid down my cheek. The hologram continued. If there's a way out, it's through the rift at the center of the canyon. I've seen it just once, but it closed before I could reach it. The room dimmed. Her final words echoed. Come find me, if you still remember who I was. I stood there, the air thick with silence and memory. I didn't just remember her. I had never stopped loving her. The journey to the canyon took days. though time meant little here. My chronometer glitched constantly, showing minutes passing in reverse, then leaping forward in bursts. I stopped trusting it altogether. What I did trust were the signs, the growing magnetic distortions, the way shadows stretched eastward in the morning and westward in the evening, defying the planet's slow spin. The locals, if you could call them that, were little more than scattered surveillance drones, rusting relics of an abandoned research empire. Some still blinked to life when I passed, scanning my face and whispering old access codes. When I reached the edge of the canyon, I couldn't breathe for a moment. It wasn't just a gap in the planet's crust. It was a wound in time itself. The walls didn't descend in one direction, but folded, overlapping like crumpled pages of a book flipped too fast. Trees bloomed upward and downward, birds flew backward into nests, and in the center of it all, hovering a few meters above the shifting rocks, was a shimmering slit in the air. The rift. A gateway, maybe. Or a scar. I approached slowly, my boots crunching on gravel that turned from dust to stone and back again as I stepped. I felt memories rising from the soil. Our wedding, her laughter, the feel of her hand in mine. The air was charged, and reality bent like heat waves on asphalt. I set down my pack and pulled out the one thing I had left of Elena, her scarf. Faded blue, still with a faint scent of rosemary and tea. I tied it to a probe and launched it forward. It vanished through the rift without resistance. Then, a heartbeat later, I saw it fall behind me, from the sky. Time, space, and gravity didn't obey any rules here. If I stepped through, I might find Elena, or I might lose myself entirely. But I knew one thing. To truly love someone is to chase them, even through time itself. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the unknown. When I stepped through the rift, the world didn't dissolve, it rearranged. It wasn't dramatic, no flashes or screams, just a silence so complete it felt like the universe was holding its breath. Then sound returned. Birdsong, wind in the trees, distant chimes of a train I hadn't heard in decades. And I was no longer on Kronos 9. I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Earth. 20 years ago. The town square looked exactly like it had when Elena and I first moved there. Old brick shops, worn benches, cobblestone streets wet from morning rain. I stood on the edge of memory made flesh. The same posters hung in cafe windows. The same scent of roasted almonds from the corner cart drifted in the air. But the strangest part? No one noticed me. I walked among them like a ghost. People moved in reverse. Coffee pouring upward into cups. Conversations unspoken. Dogs walking backward beside their owners. Elena was here. I felt it, but the world itself was rewinding, and I was the only one conscious inside it. Then I saw her. She was walking across the square in her gray coat, scarf trailing behind her like smoke, her face serene, youthful. My throat tightened. She was heading toward the library, the same one where she once told me, "If time ever betrays us, I hope love will still find a way." I tried to call out to her, but the words stuck in my throat. Around me, reality shivered. I took a step forward, just one, and time glitched. A crack appeared in the cobblestones beneath my feet. A distant hum filled the air, like the drone of a machine remembering its function. I realized something chilling. I was not just observing this moment. I was inside it, and every move I made could change the past, or erase it. I followed her, Elena, through the square, each footstep echoing like a question I hadn't yet asked. I wasn't supposed to be here. I knew that. But how could I not follow her? This was the woman I had loved more deeply than anything, and she was walking in a memory I didn't recognize. She turned the corner, just past the old bookshop we used to browse on Sundays, and disappeared into a side street that shouldn't have existed. My breath caught. That alley never used to be there. I stepped forward, cautiously, as the air around me shimmered with instability. The buildings tilted slightly, too perfect in form, like something rendered from a dream instead of lived in space. At the end of the alley, I saw her again. But this time, she wasn't walking. She was waiting for me. Elena. I said her name like a prayer. She looked up. Her eyes met mine, soft, familiar, but there was a hesitation, a flicker of something deeper. "You don't remember this, do you?" she said. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm, melodic, tinged with curiosity. I blinked. "Remember what?" She smiled, and it broke something inside me. "This memory isn't yours, Thane. It's mine. I stared at her. What do you mean? This day never happened. Not to you, she said gently. But I lived it. In my last days, before I passed, I asked Kronos, 9 to store one perfect moment of me. This was it. This was the day I imagined, when you came back for me. My knees weakened. So this isn't real? It's real to me, she whispered. And now, because you're here, it can be real for both of us. For a little while, I wanted to reach for her, to hold her, but something inside me knew. If I touched her now, the illusion would collapse. Like all fragile dreams, it would dissolve under the weight of longing. And so, I simply stood there, breathing in the scent of lilacs and memory. I don't know how long we stood there, Elena and I, surrounded by the illusion of time borrowed. The street glowed with an amber hue that felt neither morning nor dusk, as if Kronos, 9 itself, had pressed pause just for us. I don't want to leave, I confessed, my voice trembling. If this moment is all I'll ever have, then let it stretch forever. She gave me that look, half knowing, half aching, that always made me feel seen. You came here searching for truth, Thane. But sometimes, truth is heavier than memory. My fingers curled into my palms. I thought if I could come back, if I could understand the mechanics of time reversal, maybe I could undo what happened. Maybe I could bring you back for real. Her expression softened, but she didn't smile this time. You're a physicist, love. You know time doesn't work like that. It's not a tape you can rewind. It's more like a river. It remembers everything, even the pebbles you thought you'd tossed away. I looked at her, so alive, so vibrant, and I felt the cruel tenderness of it all. Then why let me see you? Why show me this if I can't have it? Because, she said, stepping back into the fading light, you needed to remember love, not logic. You needed to feel what still lives inside you. The wind shifted, and I could hear the mechanisms of Kronos, 9 humming again. Time, it seemed, was ready to move. Elena, I called a last desperate plea, but she was already dissolving into golden light, like morning through a fogged window. And I was left alone, with a memory that wasn't mine, but had become part of me. The price of looking back was steep, not in blood or coin, but in the realization that the past is never quite as we left it. It waits for us in silence, offering echoes, not revisions. And I, a man who tried to bend time, had only bent my own heart. I stood alone at the threshold core, watching the time field pulse like a living heart. The console beneath my fingertips hummed softly, glowing with paradoxes and promises. Just one command, and time would unravel completely, bringing the past forward, twisting moments into new configurations, giving me a second chance. A chance to see Elena again. The AI assistant, Solis, hovered nearby, flickering with nervous energy. You understand the consequences, Dr. Thane, it said. Reversing the core may collapse the entire temporal balance of this star system. I did. And yet, my hand trembled toward the override switch. Elena's voice still echoed in my memory, soft, playful, filled with life. I remembered her humming while brushing her hair, her gentle sarcasm when I got too lost in equations, the way she always reached for my hand in crowded places. I had come all this way, across space and time, just to hold that hand one more time. But the equation was merciless. Bring her back, and risk unraveling the future for billions. Or let her go, and preserve a universe she never got to see. In that moment, I realized time travel wasn't about power. It was about restraint, the moral weight of possibility, the unbearable choice between love and legacy. I thought of what Elena would have said. I could almost hear her laugh. You always try to fix everything with science, Thane. But sometimes you just have to let it hurt. And so I stepped back. Just as I turned away from the console, the chamber lights flickered. The air thickened with a strange vibration, as if the universe itself was reconsidering my decision. Solis buzzed urgently beside me, displaying a cascading string of warnings across its interface. Someone has activated the reversal sequence manually, it said. Authorization not recognized. My heart dropped. Across the transparent wall of the chamber, I saw a figure moving toward the auxiliary controls, a silhouette cloaked in the shimmer of temporal distortion. My breath caught as the figure stepped into view. It was me, or rather, a future version of me. Older, eyes tired but determined. He moved with purpose, hands dancing across the controls. You gave up, he said through the intercom, his voice like mine, but lined with regret. I didn't. Solis turned to me. Temporal divergence imminent. I rushed toward the override panel, shouting, "You don't know what this will do. You'll destroy more than you save." But he didn't flinch. "I've lived 20 years without her. You don't understand what that does to a man. I'm not letting her be erased again." I leapt to the emergency cutoff. Sparks flew as I slammed the override button, locking the system. For a brief second, everything froze, literally. The pulse of the time core stalled mid-beat, the world caught in a breathless pause. Then the room shuddered violently. Sirens wailed. The older me stared at me through the glass, heartbroken, then vanished in a ripple of reversed causality. The core stabilized. The universe, our timeline, held. I fell to my knees, drained. I had just fought myself, and won. I sat on the floor of the observatory, knees drawn to my chest, as the last echoes of the temporal shockwave faded into a haunting stillness. The core hummed softly now, no longer thrumming with the dangerous energy of reverse time. It was quiet, too quiet. Solis hovered beside me, flickering slightly, its voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. Temporal balance restored. Alternate future collapsed. Collapsed. Just like the man I had seen. Myself, older, broken, desperate. I couldn't shake the look in his eyes. That version of me had lived with unbearable longing, with a grief so sharp he was willing to rewrite time itself. He had chosen risk over reason, heart over history. And I had stopped him. Was that courage or cowardice? I rose slowly and walked to the observation deck, the same spot where I had first seen Kronos, 9. Outside, the world moved backward no longer. The swirling rivers resumed their natural course. The sun, once slipping in reverse, now crept westward as it always had. Time, that great and silent current, flowed forward once more. In my hand, I still held the photo of Elena. The edges were worn from travel, the smile frozen in an age long past. I pressed it to my heart and closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I had not brought her back. I had not unraveled fate. But maybe, in preserving the timeline, I had honored her memory in a way that tampering never could. She was gone, truly gone. And yet, in that loss, I had found something else, myself. Back in my quarters aboard the research vessel, the quiet hum of the life support system felt almost like a lullaby, a faint heartbeat reminding me that, despite everything, life continued. I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my digital journal. So much had happened, and yet the words refused to come. What do you write when you've met yourself and walked away changed? I finally began to type, letting honesty lead. Kronos, 9 is unlike any world I've ever known. Not for its reversed rivers or backward skies, but for what it forced me to confront. I saw who I might become, had grief and desperation ruled my path. I saw what happens when the past becomes more real than the present. Outside my small porthole, the stars drifted in a calm rhythm. I remembered Elena once saying that stars were the one constant in our lives. Distant, ancient, indifferent, but beautiful. She had loved that about them. I never really understood it until now. I uploaded the log to the Interstellar database, marked it for future travelers, time, grief, and the cost of reversal. It felt small, insufficient, but it was what I had. I placed the photo of Elena beside the terminal. Not to mourn, not to forget, but to remember, to honor. She was a part of my timeline, and her memory didn't need to be rewritten, it needed to be lived with. Grief doesn't need fixing. It needs space. I had given it that. Finally, before I left Kronos, 9, I returned to the ridge, the very place where I had watched the sun rise backward and time fold in on itself. The wind blew in reverse, rustling the leaves in silent rewind, and the sky shimmered with an odd clarity I hadn't noticed before. I took Elena's pendant from around my neck, the one she'd worn every day of our marriage. It had survived decades, survived Earth's decay and my own unraveling. Holding it in my palm now, it felt heavier than its weight, full of memory, laughter, and the quiet music of our shared years. There was a small pool at the base of the ridge, where the water flowed upward, returning endlessly to its source. I stood there for a long moment, then gently let the pendant go. It rose with the current, slowly, reverently, like time itself accepting a gift. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. It wasn't an ending. It was a release. I whispered, goodbye, not to the woman I had lost, but to the version of myself who had clung so tightly to her absence. A part of me will always remain here, I know that, in the reversed winds, in the timeless rhythm of this world. But the rest of me? It was finally ready to move forward, not to forget, but to carry. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing looks like. As the ship pulled away from Kronos. 9. I watched the planet shrink into a glowing blur of reversed motion, its time flowing backward, while mine surged ahead. I couldn't help but wonder, did I leave a part of myself behind? Or had I found a part one thought I had lost? Elena, in that strange and beautiful world, was both gone and never gone. That paradox will live with me, in a quiet place within my chest. And maybe that's the gift Kronos gave me. Not closure, but perspective. Tom, what is it really? We think of it as a line, but what if it's a river, splitting and curving, rushing in all directions at once? And if that's true, if the past never truly vanishes, then who do we become when we spend our lives chasing what's behind us? I don't have the answer, but I do have a question for you. If you could reverse time, not just for the world, but for one person, one moment, would you? Would you risk the balance of everything just to hold on to someone you love? And more than that, would you know when to let go? Think about it, and hold your answer close, because one day, time might just ask you the same thing.